Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more.
We are live on a very cold day in the Northeast. I don't know where you're recording from, Susan, but it's not the best here in terms of... I like fall. I'm a summer baby, though. I was born in July, so I like the hot weather over the cold. I don't mind fall too much, but up here, man, once it starts... But we're supposed to get a really bad winter, so as soon as we get there... Not gonna be very happy about it.
Yeah.
But this is the Drink O'Clock Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Valincius, and I have the pleasure of having Susan Snow with me. Now, Susan, you're an author, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, you know, you have a bit of a, we'll say it, I don't want to say tragic storyline, but it's tragic, right? I've had a lot of authors on the show. I've had a lot of people with tragic insights and things that have happened to them. I don't know if I've had anyone of your story. So that's why I was excited to get you here on the show. Now, I know we always love to plug the book. So your book is The Other Side of the Gun, and your journey from trauma to resiliency. So we're going to discuss a little bit of that throughout this.
Sure.
I'm sure we'll get on to some fun topics, but welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, take me back. This is obvious where the trauma starts, but I want to talk to you about before 17. Talk to me about growing up. What was life like? And then we'll get to that kind of fateful day that kind of changed your life.
Sure, absolutely. Well, growing up a cop's daughter was always interesting. I grew up a lot with the rhetoric and the things that went on back then with kids and, some of the negative talk around police officers, which hasn't really changed, but
just a different scope, right?
Yeah, back then it was interesting because my dad was actually a street cop for LAPD when I was very young, and he became a detective as I got older. And one thing I could say about my dad is he was a very present father. He always made you feel like the most important person in the room. Nothing else mattered. And I loved that about him. He was my security. There were times where I had some things happen and my dad kicked in. The cop dad kicked in. But also the protector dad kicked in, And I was, very, very proud of that. I was very proud of that I had that kind of dad. And even though he wasn't around a ton because he was working a lot, I still very much was grateful for the time that I did get with him. And
yeah, it must have been tough being in a big city. So like I'm out of Philadelphia, so LA, Philly, Chicago, a lot of those cities back in the early, mid, even sometimes late 80s.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shit going on,
Yep.
and I'm sure as a cop it was not easy to deal with a lot of the stuff going on.
Oh yeah, there was a lot going on, and but I would say that when I was younger and he was out on the streets, that was the time where I would worry more, because Daddy could get hurt out there.
Yeah.
Death never came out, I never thought of that, but I just always thought that once he became a detective, I had this false sense of security. And I thought,
Yeah.
he's got a desk job now. Like, he comes in after the fact. And he was a robbery homicide detective. So he did come in after the fact and do his investigation. And so I never thought in a million years that what happened to him would happen.
Yeah.
I also grew up with a mother, and it took me many, 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 many years to figure this out. My mom was the opposite. I grew up with a covert narcissist parent and really struggled in my teens with our relationship and with, my dad was always the go-between and the voice of reason, let's just say.
Yeah. And that's typically
Yeah.
how relationships, long-term ones, tends to last, right? Because you have the people that are just polar opposite. I mean, sometimes it's a little way too polar, but you do sometimes have somebody that can balance the other person out when someone's angry or they're feeling depressed or whatever the case is. You have that kind of push and pull.
Right.
But when you don't have that other side, that's what tends to unleash whatever is kind of lurking there or that has been there, just been kept in check.
Exactly. So I was 17 and, being a 17-year-old girl, I had my first boyfriend, serious boyfriend.
Oh, no.
And
did your dad do the old school, he just had his gun on his holster, just happened to forget to take off his belt or something?
he was very direct. Let's just put it that way. But I had been dating this guy for 3 months, and he really liked him. In fact, there were times where I was trying to pull my boyfriend away because he was locked into a conversation with my dad and taking
Been there.
my date away. So so there was that. But on Halloween of 1985, I had a normal life. I had a normal teenage life. And then that day, I wanted to go to a party. I wanted to go to a Halloween party. And I had spoke to my...
Normal kid stuff.
Yeah. I had spoke to my dad about it in the morning. He was getting ready to go to court and testify. He was a lead detective in a court case, and he was testifying that day. And he was a little nervous, which was not normal for him. But I thought, well, I'm going to talk to him about going to this party. And of course I did. And it was a school night. And he said no. And he didn't want me out on Halloween night when it's a school night. So I left for school kind of frustrated. And my dad went off to court. And the plan that night was that my dad would leave court and go to my brother's school. My brother was 6 years old at the time. And pick him up from the church school that he attended. And then come home. And my mom would be home by then. And then I could get them both together and schmooze them enough to go to this party. And unfortunately, I didn't get that chance. As I was home and my mom was home for the day, I was getting ready and the phone rang. And when the phone rang, I ran to go get it because I thought it was for me. And it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school. And all she said on the phone was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved. No other information. And so my mom came around the corner. I handed her the phone the fastest I could. And I tried to listen in. I couldn't hear anything. But I could see by her body language that it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So she got off the phone and she said, "We're going to the school." So we got in the car and it was about a 7-minute drive to the church school. And it was nighttime, it was after 5 o'clock, so it was pretty dark outside. And we rolled up to the school, and the way that the school is situated, there is a parking lot in the middle of the school. And then all the kids on after school care got out on the backside. And so that's where we headed, towards the back side of the school. At this point, we had no information on anything, so we didn't know any information. All we knew is that as we headed towards the back of the school, it looked like daylight. And that was because of all the police cars and all the lights that were blaring. There was an ambulance that sat in the street, and we kept walking and kind of glanced over and saw my dad's truck. So we started to run towards the truck. And the closer we got to the truck, we looked down and there was glass on the ground. And we rounded the corner, and there he was, partially covered up. So at that very moment, I watched my mom drop to her knees and scream. And I just froze in the street. And the only thing that I could do was hyper-focus on the ambulance. The story I was telling myself in my head is, where is everyone? Why aren't they helping him? Because I was not able to connect what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And soon enough, 2 officers grabbed both of our arms and escorted us back into the school. And we went into an office, and I sat down. My mom got taken aside by some detectives. At this point, I still didn't know where my brother was. I didn't know if he was hurt. I didn't know if he was at a hospital. I knew nothing. And I was still trying to process everything that was going on around me. It was very chaotic that night, if you can imagine.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And I could hear these 2 ladies talking, and the one lady said to the other that my dad was deceased. And in that moment, that's where my sky cracked. Like my world just crumbled. And everything in me wanted to leap up out of that chair and run out of that room and run as far from the scene as I could. And the problem was is that I felt literally like I was filled with cement. I couldn't move. And I think at that point, the shock of everything was starting to settle in. My mom came in to the room and she said, "I'm sending you with a neighbor." And I know I wanted to run out of that room. I know I wanted to run away from that situation. But the 17-year-old girl wanted to be with my family. I needed to be with my mom and my brother. And I needed that reassurance that they were there and that we were going to get through it together. And unfortunately, I didn't get that chance.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's some heavy stuff, man.
It is.
So what ended up happening with your brother? Was he just in kind of a safe area, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what they ended up doing, because he did end up witnessing my dad's death.
Oh.
My dad saved his life. He told him to duck down in the truck because he knew what was happening.
That is brutal
Yeah.
for a 6-year-old.
Yeah. So teachers took him
and that's
away.
so barbaric. That's so barbaric to do that to your dad right in front of a school. Like that's, I mean, you know, your dad was dealing with some really messed up stuff.
Yeah.
If people are willing to take him out while he's going to pick up his son, like where is the? I mean, I guess, you know, criminals don't have. I mean, maybe they have a code, but that's got to break everything.
Well,
you know,
yeah,
that's so
I mean,
messed up.
it ended up, we realized that it was the man that he had testified against. It was in retaliation. That man that was on trial for another crime that my dad was investigating, or was the lead investigator on, he was out on bail during his trial. So it gave him opportunity. But this was a planned out assassination. And because it was a planned out assassination, unbeknownst to us, we too were a target. They had followed us for months. This was planned out for months and months. In fact, there was a time where my dad was actually investigating his future assassination, without knowing it.
Wow. So God forbid if they didn't get your dad that day, what would have happened if you would have went to that Halloween party?
Who knows? I
That
mean,
is wild.
yeah. And even that night, like, my poor neighbor, I mean, she had known my family for years. And she herself, as an adult, was trying to comprehend everything around her and deal with her own emotions around it. My quiet little neighborhood was completely taken over by law enforcement. We had helicopters overhead. We had police cars up and down the streets around the corner. And I was inconsolable at that point, and she tried everything that she could to try to console me. And all I wanted at that point was my boyfriend. And so
So was this guy like, was he mafia? Was he gang?
No.
Was it like Crips Bloods type stuff?
No.
Like what was it?
it was a robbery ring, and he was the leader of this robbery ring. He had a limousine service that he used as a front for this ring, and he would use the limousine service to make connections to wealthy people so that he could rob them later.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a smart setup, I guess, but still.
Yeah.
So I guess he had a bunch of goons that kind of
Pretty
worked
much.
for him.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
And your dad had no idea up until the point where they were pulling up
No.
in his
clue.
first. I mean, that just shows, your dad's candor, right? Like, he's not thinking about pulling out his gun to try to fight these guys. He's just going to try to save your brother's life
Yep.
because he knows what's
He
coming.
knew what was happening. And so when my boyfriend, I had the neighbor call my boyfriend, and she didn't give him any information really. So when he showed up at our door, he basically was like any other guy, grab your purse. What hospital is he at? Where's your mom? Where's your brother? And I just could not spit out the words. If I said it, it was real. And the more persistent he got, though, I had no other choice. And I just blurted it out. He's gone. And he said, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, he's gone. He's not at a hospital. And I watched him collapse and sob. And both of us were just not, he was 19 at the time. And neither of us knew how to comprehend or navigate through any of this. We had no idea what we were going to do next. Like, what's our next move?
You were
I don't
kids.
know. We were
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, you were kids. I mean, and if you've never dealt with death like that, I mean, it's different. Obviously it's horrible if you lose an aunt, an uncle,
Right.
Whatever. But when you're losing someone that close
Yeah.
to you,
Yep.
it just does something to you that you can't really fix. It's just
Exactly.
always kind of there.
Yep. So it was difficult, and we finally made the choice to go home. I didn't get asked to come back. My mom was busy, dealing with what she was dealing with, on top of the shock, on top of, the trauma of everything too. And when I went home, my whole house was filled with people. I had no idea who they were. Now I do. They were dignitaries and chief of police and, all the people. But I didn't want to talk to anyone, and I didn't, I did what a normal teenage person would do, is I went and hid in my room with my boyfriend. And we just hid in there because I just didn't want to answer any questions, and I didn't want to talk to anybody, especially people I didn't know. So I stayed in there.
Yeah, I think at that point you got to kind of do the healing. Like I think there's steps to grief, right? It's like almost like you have to accept it and heal yourself.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that's not always possible. You need help. But I think that's stage one. Even if you can't fix yourself, you do have to come to the acceptance phase, right? Before you can really start to get better.
But I was besides losing my dad, now I've lost my privacy. This was a big story. So not only did we have law enforcement, but we also had the media ascend into our neighborhood and, tried to get a snapshot of whatever, that they could. And so it was just a different world for me. I went from this normal teenage life to this total chaos and upheaval and all kinds of stuff, and not knowing how to navigate any of that. This was also the mid 80s, and there was no talk of mental health back then. And there was no resources for kids. And there was very little known about PTSD back then. And even it was called shell shock. It wasn't even called PTSD. And so, at that point, I just didn't have any adults that were supportive enough for, that surrounded me with support. And I really leaned on my boyfriend and my friends to kind of pull me through that time, because it took 6 days for them to find the guys that were involved. And during those 6 days, we had police presence in our front yard and our backyard. And I had bodyguards that went with me wherever I went.
That's rough.
So, after the funeral, everything kind of calmed down. Everybody went away like normal, happenings. And I was just left with what PTSD gives you, which is deep depression. I had suicidal ideation, although I didn't know what it was. I felt completely out of control internally. And I was terrified to tell any adult how I was feeling, because I thought that they would just throw me in a loony bin and call it a day.
Yeah, I guess back then too. I mean, that's just they'll be quick to throw you somewhere, and then back then they just kind of threw away the key. They didn't really care too much.
And I didn't know enough about, I knew enough, like, if you go to a therapist, you're nuts, like you're crazy. That was my kid brain back then. And during that time, I was living in a fog. I was walking around in a fog, and if you pushed me in a direction, that's the direction I would go. I had no sense of advocacy for myself. I didn't know how to, I knew how to internalize everything that I was feeling, but I didn't know how to verbalize what I was feeling. And my mom came to me and said, it was about a month later, she said that LAPD wanted to pay for therapy for all three of us, my brother, my mom, and I. And because I was in the state of mind that I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to therapy. And I did. I went to this therapist, and in hindsight, he was not trauma competent, nor was he trauma informed, and therefore was not willing to dip his toes in the weeds, so to speak. So he never asked me any questions that would allow me to feel comfortable enough to tell him what was going on externally or internally. And he kept our sessions very much about common things like my relationship with my mom and my brother and my boyfriend and school, because I was a senior in high school at that point. And every week I went to this man thinking, oh my gosh, today's the day. Today's the day he's going to say something or do something that's going to make me feel better. And it didn't happen. And I saw him for a year. And at the end of the year, he looked at me and said, you're a well-rounded young lady. You're going to be fine for the rest of your life. And I don't need to see you anymore. I literally walked out of that office thinking I had snapped. Like I was nuts. And that everything that I was dealing with emotionally, I was going to have to figure it out myself and deal with it myself for the rest of my life. At that point.
And I'm sure that happened a lot back then, especially, unfortunately for women, because I feel like a lot of things that women would, openly talk about, whether it was with therapists or even police or authority figures, they just kind of waved it away. I mean, how many times did young girls go missing? And they said something or told someone and like, oh yeah, the family says something, right? They're like, oh, they just ran away. And it's like, no, they were kidnapped.
Yeah.
You need to like go find them. And it's like, I guess it's crazy to think, I mean, I was born in the 80s, so I was 86. So, I still grew up, late 80s and into the 90s. So
I was a senior in high school.
I'm still young, but I was around during the time before cell phones existed and all this, and I appreciate those times. But also, it's hard to think where we are now.
Yeah.
And even 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like 40 years ago where we were. And it's just such a short blip in history and how much has changed, and not just the dynamics socially, right, with men and women, but also psychologically with therapists and psychotherapists and all that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you would tell somebody how you felt and they would just gaslight you, And so I was already being gaslit at home. I didn't need to be gaslit by other people.
And you're at a very impressionable age, too, 17, 18. That's like coming of age and learning how to be an adult. And that just... what you experience just cut that into like, okay, you're an adult now, you're going to deal with this.
Right.
And it's I think that struggle's already hard for someone.
Yeah.
Maybe not now, because I think, kids are like living at home until they're 30, but then it was a different story, right? When, my family was like, all right, you're 18, what are you doing?
I moved out because it was either I move out or something bad was going to happen. But at the same time, it was, I created what I call an emotional mask based on what people said about me. So most people that met me, they didn't see the internal turmoil. And so their thought was, oh, she's so strong and she's so brave, right? And so that was the mask I made for myself. It was like, that's what I'm going to let people see. The brave Susan and the strong Susan. That's what they're going to see. But the inside of me was fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Like I was fighting for my life, literally. And that went on for 14 years of my life.
Wow.
I married the boyfriend. We're still together 40 years later.
Oh, well, congrats. That's
Thanks.
A great story.
He's been through it with me. He's had trauma just right alongside me. And we just got to a point where when we had we had our first two kids, that I decided that it was time. And I thought that if I left all of that in Southern California and moved to another state, I didn't have to bring it with me, which is a big lie. But it's a lie I told myself, because when I was in Southern California, there was always that bit of me that looked behind my shoulder all the time. I mean, when you've been a target, it's just there, right? And even though these men were incarcerated, it was still there. And I just got to a point where I just didn't want to feel like that anymore. that insecure
Especially with
feeling.
you having kids
Yeah.
too now. That changes a lot
Yeah,
of things.
it did. And so we decided to relocate to Colorado, to Denver, Colorado. And we moved here
Okay.
to start our new life. And we got here April of 1997. And I was working as a hairdresser at the time and had been a hairdresser for many years. And I worked at a salon that was very close to Littleton, Colorado. And I worked on April 20th of 1999. I was doing some clients' hair. I took a break, went into the back room, turned on our little TV set back there, and up popped the live coverage of the Columbine shootings. And as I stood there and I saw the school and the ambulance and the police cars and the kids that were around my same age, I literally started having flashbacks of the night my dad was killed. And it caused me to go into a panic attack. I was having a visceral reaction, but I didn't understand why. Because I was told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life.
You were cured. You were cured.
And so I was like, what is happening to me right now? Why am I having this reaction? And even my colleague was looking at me because no one knew my story. And she's like, you don't even live near this area. What's going on with you? You know, and I said, I have no idea. I have no idea. And she left the room and I did what I normally did. I put that mask back on and I became stoic. And I kept telling myself, this has nothing to do with me. I'm going to feel better tomorrow. You know, this is going to go away. This feeling is going to go away.
Yeah.
And obviously my heart broke for the families and the children and everybody, but I just thought, well, this has nothing to do with me, right? I don't have any kids attached to this. I'm not living in the neighborhood, whatever. And I finished my day with that stoic face on, and everyone around me was a hot mess. You know, they were angry, they were sad, there were tears, you know, and I was like, nope, I'm going to finish my day. And I finished my day and I walked out the doors and I walked to my car and everything came flooding back to me. And this time it was worse. I stopped sleeping, which is not good when you're dealing with depression.
No, it is not.
I stopped sleeping. My suicidal ideation was probably the worst that I've ever seen it. And this time it was scary because now I'm a mom. And there was part of me that didn't want to feel that way anymore. But then there was that part of me that I was a mom and I couldn't leave my babies. And so I had this internal fight going on. And my husband, the smart man that he is, recognized that I was spiraling. And he stopped me at the door one day and he said, you have two choices. You either go get help today or I'm putting you in a hospital. And I said, at that point I was terrified. And I put up that white flag and surrendered and said, okay, I'll go get help today. And I made an appointment with a physician, and he put me on antidepressants because that's what they do. And then he handed me a business card of a trauma therapist. And I looked at him and I literally laughed in his face. And I said, I tried this 14 years ago. It didn't work. You know, how do you think this is going to work this time? And he said, really, you don't have a choice at this point. And I said, you're right. You're right. You know, I had already put up that flag of surrender. So I made an appointment with this woman. And in the first 3 minutes of sitting down with her, I knew this was different. She was finally asking me those questions that I had longed to hear many years ago.
Yeah.
That allowed me to feel like I was in a safe space. And because I felt safe, I was able to be vulnerable and really tell her everything I went through when I was 17 to what I was currently dealing with. And she listened intently. And then she looked at me and she said, Susan, everything you've gone through since you were 17 is normal because you have PTSD. And I looked at her and I was so confused because I thought, wait, I'm not in the military. I didn't go to war. What are you talking about? And she said, no. She said, anybody who goes through any type of trauma can experience PTSD. But what you need to understand is that it's not something that just goes away. It's something you learn to manage. And that was the moment that I had hope. And I realized, oh my God, I can actually heal from this. And she's my person that's going to guide me in this journey and help me to heal. And, I always describe it as the sky opened up and rainbows shot out because there were a couple of things. One, I had answers to all the craziness that I had been feeling, that out of control feeling all these years. There was a name for it. I knew what I was dealing with now. It wasn't a question mark. And I knew I wasn't crazy. And that was...
Crazy is such a...
I was grateful.
Yeah. Crazy is such a weird word,
It
right?
is,
I mean,
it
we
is.
throw it around. And you could be crazy for many things. But I think what you experienced, you went through fits of craziness, right? But I think it was warranted with what you dealt with.
Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting point you brought up, where it's like, you have PTSD, and you're like, well, I'm not in the military. How can I possibly have PTSD? And I think that's gotta be one of those underlining problems that people go through, where they go through a trauma, and whether it's a small trauma, right, or it's a big trauma, like something that happened to you, I think we all have our own little form of PTSD.
Yeah,
and
we do. And
right? I mean,
I don't even
it's
like
not perfect.
the D part. I don't like the disorder part because it feels like it's something like there's so much negative connotation to disorder, right? It's like there's no hope for you, right? And I don't believe that. So, I always say, post-trauma, because post-trauma stress is a real thing and we all do go through it. Various different traumas, not all trauma is the same.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the messages that I try to put out, is that no matter what trauma you have, the therapist, the professional that you find needs to be trauma competent in that type of trauma, because there's not a one size fits all. And everybody's journey is different. And everybody's modalities are different. So you have to make sure that you are working with someone that understands your type of trauma. And if they're not, there's some therapists out there that want to lump everybody into one big pool, and you can't do it. You can't do it, because those are the people, and I've had many conversations with professionals on this end that agree with me when they say it is important for you to understand the structure of the type of trauma that you are dealing with.
It's also important to get the right psychologist / psychiatrist. And
absolutely.
I encourage people. I think you get second opinions, right?
Sure.
I need my AC fixed. Guy comes in, gives me a quote. I might have someone else come in. I think more people need to do that with their counselors, right? Because you might not vibe with the person, and they might be a great psychologist or a psychiatrist, but you might not vibe with them. And if you're not feeling that, you're going to be standoffish to tell them everything.
That goes back to my saying about having that safety, feeling that safety space, that safe space with that person, because the only way that you're going to heal from trauma is to be vulnerable. And you will hold back. You will not be vulnerable if you don't feel safe in in that relationship. And I tell people, your your therapist relationship is probably one of the most intimate relationships you're going to have besides with your partner, right? And
Yeah.
so in doing that, you have to be vulnerable. And I know that's a scary, scary word for people, and I get that, but honestly, I tell people the truth. And the truth is that this healing journey is not easy. It's hard. It's scary. But I will tell you, but when you do take the time, if you think about it this way, you're actually taking your power back when you choose to heal from something. You're telling that person or that thing that it can no longer have a hold on you, that you're gonna rise up from it, you're gonna heal from it, right? And I feel like when I talk to people in that concept, taking their power back, because there's so many different traumas that you literally feel like you've lost your power. So it's really important for you to find that power back, to get that power back, to move you forward.
Yeah, and you gotta, when you're talking to these people, and you're spilling your innermost, I don't want to say secrets, but your innermost thoughts and things, right? You also have to make sure you got someone that cares.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody. I wanted to be a psychologist, right? I'm good at listening. But I think that, and I actually just had 2 episodes ago, I had a psychologist on the show. I'm sorry, a psychiatrist on the show. And because I always talk to him, and like I had a negative connotation with psychiatrists because I grew up with my stepdad being bipolar, and all they did was just they didn't listen to him, and he went through a tragedy. He had his dad and his brother die in a car accident around the holidays, and so you have that on top of him being bipolar. He would go through episodes around the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. You can almost expect him to overdose on something that he found, whether it's NyQuil or like just the dumbest stuff, right? But it's trauma, and it's like I had that negative feeling because of all the psychiatrists he's seen, and all they do is just give him pills. They didn't listen to him, and so I always encourage people: don't just go see someone that's going to give you some pills to make you think you feel better. Like, see a psychologist or a psychiatrist that really listens to you. Yeah. And I know sometimes, especially with someone that's bipolar, you need meds, right? Bipolar's like
sure. Yeah,
the polar end of that.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're really vibing with who you're sitting with, right? You're paying them, so you should have some sort of connection with them. And if you don't feel it, go find somebody else.
Right.
I'm sure that the counselor on the other side of the table feels the same way, right? We're human.
Well, absolutely.
You need that connection.
And now I feel like, everything has evolved, right? And we're really working more of the cognitive therapies and those types of modalities for people who have gone through trauma, and they tend to do better with it. I always tell people, like, you've got to try different things to see what works for you specifically. And not everything works. Not everything that I've done is going to work for other people, right? So you just got to find your own path in that. And that's why I said it goes back to having the therapist that understands your type of trauma, because there's different modalities for different types of trauma as well. So you want to make sure that you are going on the right journey with that person. And the other thing I hear this a lot is like, oh, well, my insurance will only pay for these people or whatever, which is really unfortunate. But I always tell people that it is your healing, it is not theirs. And because it is your healing, and it's you're the one that's doing the work, and you're the one that is making the financial, you're paying for this
investment,
your investment in yourself, that you can interview your therapist. it goes back to what you were saying, is that not everybody is for everybody, right? And you've got to find the right person that you click with, that you feel safe with, that understands your type of trauma.
Yeah.
And that's when the true healing happens. And I will tell you, not having all of that stuff, or even better yet, it took me 4.5 years to write my book. And the reason it did is because I had to relive and re-feel all of the emotions, because that's what I wanted the reader to do. I wanted to take the reader on the journey so they could see from the beginning to the end this journey. And so in doing that, when I did choose to write the book, I was 50. And I don't know what it is about 50. You turn 50 and all of a sudden it's like draw a line in the sand and you got to get things done, right? And
dyeing your hair red,
right,
you're like,
whatever,
you know,
like whatever it is, like we all kind of
Harley it up.
get to something where we're like, we've got to do something, right? We got to do something as meaningful in our lives. And so I knew at that moment that I mentally was capable and strong enough to do this book. And I had the tools in my tool belt, that when these emotions would come up, or if I got triggered by anything or whatever, then I would have the tool that would help me to regulate my nervous system again and get me back into a better state of mind. And that is powerful. Being able to know, okay, I'm having this feeling and I'm feeling this feeling, and I know what to do to pull me out of this emotion is very important. So,
what was your writing style like? Like, how did you write? Because I know I've interviewed a lot of authors, and some people, they need complete silence in a room. Some people go out to a bar and need to talk to people. Like, what was your process like? Obviously, with something like this, with being such a traumatic event for you, did you need kind of like your own space in order to do it? Or
yeah, I mean, there were times when I was really diving into the heavy stuff that I literally had to put myself in a hotel room by myself. Like, left the husband behind and said, bye-bye. I'm putting myself into a hotel for a couple of days. And I wrote. And otherwise, it was here. It was in my house. I would just block out time in the morning. And I would write for 2 hours in the morning. The other side of that was there were days where I had put so much into it that I had nothing left, like literally nothing. And I couldn't meet with clients. I couldn't, I wasn't a hairdresser. I was in real estate by then, but I had nothing left. But I had to learn to give myself some grace on those days and do something that gave me joy. Something that would bring my state of mind back into a more alignment and my nervous system back into alignment as well. So, the process, that's why it took me 4.5 years. It was just days where I was like, I'm not feeling it today. And so I'm going to give myself a couple of days and start back again. And, and that's okay. That's fine. If you're not on some kind of a deadline, which I was not. I mean, I gave myself an internal deadline. I felt like my dad was kicking me in the rear end to get it done, like literally.
How did it feel to put your innermost thoughts in one of the darkest days of your life? How did it feel to put that on paper and allow the world to read it?
Terrifying.
That's always the word every author uses when I ask them that. It's terrifying.
Terrifying. It is. Because when I decided to write this book, I knew there were a few fears that came up, One was my mom and I's relationship was already dangling by a string, right? And
Yeah.
in telling my story, I wanted to be 100% authentic. Like, no holds barred, completely out there, vulnerable for the entire world. That's why it was terrifying. But in telling my story, I had to tell hers, part of hers.
Yeah.
And I knew that that would either break what was left or open a conversation. Because in the 4 years, 4.5 years that I wrote this book, she asked me about it twice. And there was no real interest in knowing. In fact, she didn't even think that I was doing it for publishing.
You were just doing it to do
Right,
it.
for funsies.
Yeah. Relive all those old horrible wounds
Right, for funsies.
just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I thought that. The other thing is that, I've been with the same man for 40 years and we have gone through hell and back together. And I write about it. I write about it in my book as well. And so I thought that might bring up some old wounds for him. And the third fear was my safety. When you've already been a target and you're rehashing some of this stuff and putting it out there and putting myself out there, there was always that little thing in the back of my head. Is there going to be retaliation? Are they going to come after me for putting this out there again? And every time I had those fears, I had to think about the core reason why I wanted to write this book. And it wasn't just about being cathartic for me. I thought about the law enforcement community because there were so many people that my dad's death still brought on so much anger and sadness, even 40 years later, right? And I thought,
Wow.
if they saw my journey and they saw the resiliency side, that maybe something inside of them could heal as well. And the more I thought about it, I thought, oh my gosh, there are people out there, other people, that have gone through trauma. Or maybe they went through trauma, but they don't realize they went through trauma. And maybe those people can connect with what I say, and maybe those people can see hope in healing from whatever it is they've gone through. And so every time those fears popped up as I was writing, I just focused on those faceless people out there that needed to hear this message and that needed to see the hope and feel the hope and see the resiliency side of healing from something like this.
Now, I'd be remiss to not ask, what happened with your brother?
So
How is he?
So my brother, he struggled.
Yeah.
My brother lived with a lot of survivor's guilt. Even though he was 6 years old, he still felt like maybe something he could have done to save his dad.
Yeah.
And, he made some bad choices in his life. He chose the drug route, and that was his coping mechanism. My mom drank, and that was her coping mechanism. And there's no judgment in that because everybody deals with trauma differently, right? And so my brother self-sabotaged, and he got to a point, though, where he decided that enough was enough, and he got clean all by himself. And
It's a tough thing to do.
He's on his journey now, and and has been for some years. And he and I have reconciled our relationship, and he's doing fantastic. I call him my Hercules because he's been through hell and he's still on this earth, and he's also like 6'2" and almost 300 pounds, but for my baby brother, right? He's my baby brother and he's 6'2", but yeah, I mean, he's doing incredibly well for the journey that he has had in his life, and I'm extremely proud of him. Extremely.
Hey, look, sobriety is. I know we're on the Drink O'Clock podcast, and I'm drinking right now, but I will tell you this: sobriety is it's a beautiful thing. My brother is a heroin addict, and he's been sober now. It's got to be close to 4 years. He had a son. He's got a fiance. I thought he was going to be dead. So, I tell him every day, that I can, that I'm proud of you for staying alive. And I think, when you talk diseases, I think addiction, it really is a disease because it never goes away.
Right.
It's always that itching, clawing
The
thought
back of your
in the
head.
back of your head.
Yep.
I talk about this. I was addicted to energy drinks. And I went cold turkey and just stopped 3 years ago. And I keep a bunch of energy drinks on the bottom shelf in my fridge so that I can just look at them and be like, I beat you.
Nice.
I beat you, man.
Nice.
And have I had the thoughts of cracking one open? Of course,
Sure.
because it was my vice. Look, energy drinks aren't a drug, but that was my thing. I've never been a drug guy. I smoked pot,
Right.
back in the day, whatever, but drugs were never my thing. I enjoy having some booze. It's kind of, hopefully I don't have a problem. I don't think so. I'm sure I'd know by now if I had an issue, but, it's just one of those things where I applaud someone that can get through that because it's difficult and, has its own trauma for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's been through the ringer, and now, he has a beautiful wife, and he is got stepchildren. He's got his own daughter.
It's awesome.
He's a pop now with grandkids, and it's amazing to see his journey and see what he's done in his life as well. I'm proud of the both of us that we were able to rise up out of this and do some positive things in our life. And I'm still trying. I'm still working on that, but I always tell people I'm just the messenger. I'm the messenger, and just trying to get my message out so that if I can help one person out there, one person hears my voice and is able to connect with what I say, then I've done my job.
Well, look, I appreciate you. I think this is a great conversation. I just actually, I don't know if you got an email, but I just bought your book.
Oh,
because I always like to support anyone that's on my show. If I can help, I'm always happy to do that. Can you tell my listeners where can they find your content? Where can they find your stuff so we can kind of end there?
Sure, absolutely. I have a website, and it's susansnowspeaks.com. My book is on Amazon. It is in paperback form. It's on Kindle, so if you're on Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. And then I also recorded my own audiobook, so it is on
Love
there.
It. I bought the audiobook,
Oh,
so
awesome.
I'm excited to listen to it.
Awesome. So I that was a whole other bag of worms, but yeah, and I'm on IG too. It's Susan_Snow1, and you can contact me through my website or on IG. I'm open to conversations. I'm also a coach, so trauma resiliency life coach. So if you hear this and have any questions, or maybe you're considering starting a journey of healing, and you just want someone to talk to, I do a 40-minute free discovery call, and you can contact me through my website for that.
Awesome. Well, look, it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
My podcast is Drink O'Clock Pod on all socials. Drink O'Clock Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll have this up probably sometime next week.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a great night.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
On a stormy night where legends unfold, there's a podcast that's breaking the mold. Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more. We're ready for more. With a mix of folklore and rebel cheer here, we'll guide you through tales of whiskey and beer. From Irish shores to lands afar, grab your friends, it's time to